principles of Amazon is always being right. It's because you have to be able to shift gear on the fly to say, okay, we got thrown a curveball. I got a blizzard. My shift's coming in. I need them to do 125,000 in that 4-hour sort. Okay, now we got to reallocate staff to key areas to maximize that effect in order to hit that target. And there's things you can do. Like for me, I know we used to do it with the ops managers there. When every employee associate would come in, they knew what the number was for that day. They knew what the shift sort number needed to be.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our #1 priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. There are two types of chaos. You have a manageable chaos that can be planned easily, and then you have organized chaos that require you to shift gears all the time as the planning variables change. If there is one function that can challenge any planning model, it would be logistics. There are so many variables such as labor, traffic, third-party carriers, geopolitical conditions, macroeconomic factors. As logistics executive, you not only need to make sure that you have timely delivery, but you also need to do it in the cost-effective manner. In today's episode, our guest, John Hantzis, discusses why connecting the dots among the strategy, operations, and execution is critical for supply chain function. He also discusses why the communication and collaboration is key even among the same supply chain function covering different regions to find operational synergies. Finally, he discussed why ops is all about shifting gears on the fly and describes concepts such as cross-docking, FTZ, reclassification of tariff codes, moving supply chain due to geopolitical issues, and a lot more. Let me introduce John to you. John has a passion for logistics and supply chain management with over 18 years of experience helping to provide cost savings within the supply chain. He has expertise in international and domestic shipping for both air and ocean, full trailer and less than container loads for all freight needs, warehousing, white glove, as well as next flight out capabilities, whether it is a single pallet or full cargo plane. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey, John, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Look forward to this.
Yeah, and this is going to be so exciting. When I heard your stories about the operations, I mean, they are always fascinating, the kind of things that you guys need to do. So I'm super excited to dig into that. Before we do that, do you want to start telling our listeners who you are and what your focus is these days?
Sure. Yeah. My name is John Hantzis. I'm the Director of Logistics for AMP Global. Prior to this, I actually spent most of my time, I supply chain operations. Depending on the size of the company, ops can be a very broad range where you can have procurement, logistics. Spent some time with Amazon as well, helping distribution centers all the way to courier companies doing the routing algorithms for optimal delivery. So over the course of 20 years, I've covered quite a bit. And I think that's kind of like what I consider my job now is the way I tell it to the board of directors or our executive team is I'm there to be the bullpen. I'm there to give them as many options as I can provide them from a logistics standpoint.
Yeah.
And then they choose which one they want to go for based on the direction they want to be. But my job is to provide as many options to them on the table as possible, whether it's air shipment, ocean, efficiencies and where to optimally store inventory. All of that stuff is reliable on the data that you have. And having the correct data, you pretty much can do a lot of, what if scenarios and so forth to help push that, as I always say, trying to make tomorrow better than today.
Yeah. Very interesting insights there. And I'm going to definitely dig into all of that. But before we do that, we have one of these standard questions that we ask every single guest. And that is going to be, John, your perspective on business growth.
I think, if I'm looking at, say, like my particular company, I think they're just scratching the surface on what is capable. And I think especially when you're looking at like a post-COVID situation, the mindset in business has changed tremendously in a pre or post-COVID scenario, if you will. So from a business growth, I think the potential is astronomical compared to what is out there, as everyone today wants that Amazon effect. They want that stuff tomorrow. They want it cheap. They want it reliable. They want good quality. And you're trying to get to that point, to make that possible with all supply chain inefficiencies that exist. Most of logistics, as I've always said, is organized chaos. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be smooth. Your job is to lessen that roller coaster ride for your company to make the best situation possible given the scenarios you have in front of you.
Yeah, so very interesting insights there, and organized chaos. I mean, even inside the chaos, I guess, it could be systematic chaos. And I think that's what you are referring to. Or it could be real chaos, okay?
Well, you have everything because, you look at, a lot of people talk about the bullwhip effect pre-COVID because now many companies are going to just in time. They want to only buy what they want to have sales, but they're forcing their manufacturers to the same effect. So now you're buying just in time, but your manufacturer now, they're buying just in time. They don't have raw components. They don't have the inventory. And for anyone in like the purchasing or procurement world, if the sales forecast came out of a Cracker Jack box and it's not accurate, you're not buying to a correct thing. Like if they said we want to average 50,000 a month and all of a sudden you get an order for 75,000, that's way out of the realm. Not that it's impossible, but you got to move some significant things around. Your procurement team has to wonder, do they have enough allocation spend in their budget to be able to do that? To make it one time. So there's a lot of hurdles that it crosses into when you have those kind of chaotic moments. And it's just a matter of, do you have the right communication within those teams to be able to pull that off?
Yeah, so very interesting commentary there. And I'm going to add some more layers there, and you can offer some more commentary if you agree with me or not, or even if you disagree, that's completely okay. So the way I see this is, and I don't know if this is going to be the accurate depiction of the problem or not, but in my mind, this is going to be a very zero-sum game. Okay, just because now everybody's going for JIT, all gonna come back. So I don't know if you're going to have any sort of net effect there, right? Because of
I look at it, if you look at, like, I'm a big fan of listening to like Simon Sinek. And if you look at what his talks are, and he talks about the infinite game. The job, your task is not to outdo your competitors to your left and your right. Your job is to make your company there in the future and not pay attention to the focus on the side of what your competitors are doing. Your job is to keep playing the game you're in and being in that mind space, because companies are going to come and go, especially where you look at larger companies that are owned private equity. Or those kind of investor dollars that they're going to pump into the market, then they're going to pull it out and leave. They're going to get in for money and leave. So you have to go into it with what Simon talks about is the infinite mindset. You have to go in there to just continually, perpetually playing that game and making your company a player in that space, regardless of what your competitors.
Yeah, so very interesting insights there. So now let's go back to the conversation that we were having in the pre-show, and last few days we have had this conversation, and you talk a lot about this mindset where, and I used to talk only in 2 layers, but you have sort of 3 layers there, right? So one is I think you mentioned the strategy, and then you have the operational mindset and the technical side, right? In my experience, Don, okay, and again, you can call me out on this one, okay, typically for any mindset, whether you are going to be strategy or ops, and I like to compare this with, Sheldon from Big Bang Theory. Okay, either you are going to be a strategy guy, or you are going to be an ops guy, or you are going to be an engineer. Okay, that's how we sort of grew up. That's how we operate. That's how we think. That's how our heads are wired. Okay.
Yes.
So either you are going to be a strategy guy, or you are going to be an ops guy, or you are going to be a tactical person. Okay. So now, first, describe the differences in each 3, and where do you think you are in your approach, the way you manage it? And by the way, do you agree with me or not with this assessment?
Well, I think I do agree with you in the sense that most people do have to pick that niche that you're going to play in. But the caveat to that, for me, is you need that individual that connect all 3 dots. Because like what I say, you have strategic, operational, and tactical. Your strategic is your vision from your CEO, your board of directors. Your operation is your directors, VPs, that enact that vision to what they feel can accomplish that.
Yep.
And then your operational is, the guy boots on the ground, the day to day. The problem is a lot of times a tactical plan fails in the operational stages.
Yeah.
You look at some of these big companies that have huge supply chain problems. It wasn't the vision. It was someone couldn't connect the dot and put those final little puzzles. It's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. You can have everything in front of the table. Yes, you have a completed unit on the table, but you need somebody that can put those together and have the mindset to understand what's happening at each level. And that's kind of where I look at myself is I understand and can empathize with all three levels.
Yeah.
But my job is to enact something that can encompass all. Something that I can take from a high level vision and enact it to a day-to-day level, like, helping the warehouse staff pick orders efficiently, making sure their inventory is there on time, making sure they have everything they need. And then you reverse engineer that essentially for that plan to be able to hit that vision. And I think as you look at big companies that hit it every time, and then you have very large companies that have problems, it's because there's no one there connecting that dot. Your purchasing teams on the West Coast, your ops teams on the East Coast, and there's very little conversation or dialogue because they kind of have what I call the blinders on. They're only focused on that strategic, which is on their desk, but not how it impacts the person above them or below them. And I think until you can actually realize what you do in your day to day and what you effectively cause as a cause and an effect above and below you, then, to me, that's when you really have an organization functioning full steam ahead, is having that full vision, that conversation and the communication between everybody to be able to have that. And you obviously, yes, you need players that strategic, only focus on one level, but you need to have those players to be able to connect all those dots.
Yeah, could not agree more. And I think it's all about the alignment. That's what you are, trying to communicate, right? And I like to compare this with weddings, okay? There are going to be some weddings that are going to be successful, and there are going to be weddings that are going to be chaotic, okay? In weddings also, you are going to have a bunch of plan. The plan is never going to work out just because some people are not going to follow rules. It's very, very hard.
Or your seating arrangement. You get the wrong people at the wrong table.
Exactly. There are so many different things that could go wrong, right? But typically, the problem is really going to be in alignment. As long as people are following what the strategy people or the ops people are saying, yes, their involvement is going to be necessary to create the plan. But once the plan is created, then everybody has to follow that. And that's what happens, let's say, with any ERP implementation or whatever, right? Typically, with the ERP implementation or any sort of implementation, enterprise-wide problems, you are operating on shared data. You are operating on shared processes. In my experience, okay, everybody sort of want to go in their direction, okay? Even if you have a plan, even if you are going to have the strategic plan, the operational plan, but still everybody wants to go in their direction just because they might not understand how their actions may impact others. Okay, so that's why that alignment is very important. So do you agree with this?
Yeah, and like I said, you need to have that unified vision. You can work independently, but as long as the unified vision is clear and everyone knows what that is, yes, you work independently. You're each doing independent sections that can contribute to that. But the unified vision and the goal has to be clearly identified and known in order for everybody to work together, regardless of what space they're in or how far apart they are. That dialogue needs to exist to be able to have that communication.
Yeah, exactly. Could not agree more. I think great insights there. So let's go back to your experience about Amazon. And I don't know how comfortable you are going to be sharing the experience, honestly speaking, because, the people that I have worked with who have been on the, warehouse floor or the real floor inside Amazon. And it's always fascinating. And I always like to interview the users, how was your experience when you were working there? And for them, I mean, everything is sort of tracked. And that is not more in the negative sense that I'm trying. What I'm trying to say is the process is so systematized that you don't have to think. You simply need to follow it. Okay.
Yes.
In most cases, when you look at these smaller operations, typically people have a lot of thinking. They have a lot of ad hoc processes that they are able to accommodate as part of their workflow. Okay, when you are going to have a problem, you can pretty much do whatever you want as the operational guy. But those things do not scale when you are going to have a model. So
Yes.
tell me, the differences in approach, because my understanding of Amazon approach would be that you are not going to have a lot of room as the operations guy to be able to make changes in the process based on your approach.
Well, you need to be able to react on the fly. So say, for instance, for me, up north, it was the 2 locations there. Up north, and similar to you see in Toronto, you have a blizzard. Now, my goal for that day might have been, say, 500,000 packages.
Yeah.
Well, a blizzard now means 20% of my staff can't make it in.
Yeah.
My number doesn't change. My number still has to be the number. But now we got to enact the plan on the floor to say, how are you going to do it with less people?
Yeah.
And so that's why you always have one of the principles of Amazon is always being right. It's because you have to be able to shift gear on the fly to say, okay, we got thrown a curveball. I got a blizzard. My shift's coming in. I need them to do 125,000 in that 4-hour sort. Okay, now we got to reallocate staff to key areas to maximize that effect in order to hit that target. And there's things you can do. Like for me, I know we used to do it with the ops managers there. When every employee associate would come in, they knew what the number was for that day. They knew what the shift sort number needed to be. So it was, hey, this is what we're going for today. Some fun stuff. We would do associate birthdays and things like that. But they came in, they knew exactly what we needed to do. They knew exactly where their assignment was for that day. And then as a collective whole, they knew what they contributed at the end. Because like a lot of times, you see like Prime Week and you see those posts. Like those are some of the most chaotic times in an Amazon sort center is you're trying to do 20, 30% more than you normally do. But most importantly, keeping everybody safe. Because, it's easy to throw numbers on the board, but are you doing it safe? Are you doing your part to make that associate wanted to come back in the next day? And I think that was the biggest thing. So, as far as a plan, we had to be able to operate on the fly because you'd have trucks break down, you'd have a conveyor go down. Some of the centers, I was at one that had both. It had an autonomous that the cameras would do. Then you had one that was manual sort. One would go down. And, if that thing was down for an hour, you'd lose 15, 20,000 packages.
Yeah.
And so that's not an option. So it's like, okay, you need to be able to have that mindset to shift gears on the fly, reroute and reprioritize, knowing what you needed to do. And that's why you relied on my team of you have area managers that report all the way down to process assistants and associates, being able to shift gears on the fly to be able to adjust to anything that was thrown at you. And I think that's what they've always done right, is being able to scale with that, and then it's just a matter of how do you apply that to other companies?
Yeah.
Because most companies don't have the bankroll. You don't have the ability to go spend $200,000 on a camera system that can pick up 6-way dimensional QR codes and auto sort those things. So it's how do you do what you have the most efficient way? And a lot of times you look at your, like, say, a current company would be, let's look at the day-to-day activity. How much are they putting out a day?
Yeah.
What's that daily moving average? And how would it look if we were able to increase it by 5%?
Yeah.
What would that be for the bottom line of the company? So, you're able to try little things.
Yeah.
And, because all those individual milestones, that if you, tweak something, you can see where it was going. But you have to be able to have those conversations with the people on the floor, the managers of those warehouses. You need to be able to have that full communication, consideration, and more importantly, cooperation to be able to do that. And I think that's where some companies go wrong is they try to push this agenda and it's not what everyone wants, that you can't force somebody to do something that's not going to happen. Unless your goal is unified, unless that process is smoothed out, like you can't just keep switching gears constantly and expect the same result.
Yeah, could not agree more, to be honest. So let's dig a little bit more into this whole Amazon psychology, okay? And honestly speaking, the comment that you mentioned overall from the camera perspective, the reason why they want to have so much technology in the warehouse is they are trying to track how to be efficient. And again, you can tell me if I'm off here, okay? Because obviously you would know about Amazon far better than I do, right? So for them, or, from the operations management perspective, whatever you are going to plan, if that gets executed one-to-one, then we have happy life. That doesn't happen in the real life, right?
No.
You are always going to have changes, but you need to be closer to the plan. If the plan is always changing, then it's very hard, right? So in your case, let's say if the blizzard happens and then you are not able to operate as per the plan, but you have to do the reporting, right? And I don't know how the reporting worked, but my understanding would be that there is going to be some sort of accountability. Why did you change the plan? Because that planning, the change in the plan at the site level, changes the corporate planning. That changes the corporate cost structure, right? That may change the scheduling.
Any change that was made at any location would be known corporate-wide, all the way to corporate level within 10 minutes. If there was a failure, it's known very quickly across the board. And normally what happens is if you missed a target, there used to be an email or stuff that would go out to say, hey, these ones didn't hit their number because of, situations. So like, blizzards, tornadoes, they would call what's called a SEV. And, you would say, hey, we missed 10,000, 15,000 packages because of a blizzard. It's understandable in those cases because sometimes the trucks can't even move. So in those, at that point, there's absolutely nothing you can do. But when you have a situation that the people can't get in, but the trucks can move, you have the same thing. I mean, and it's all the way down to like lightning storms or wind storms. Like if the wind gets over certain gust miles per hour, they shut the yards down. No truck moves, so all of a sudden you're watching that ticket, but now everyone all the way up to your regional or national manager knows what's going on within 10 minutes. And there's communications that are happening instantly because one little impact in one little area of the states could have an impact across the whole country. Because you're sending stuff, say if you're at an Amazon location like mine, we would do cross-docking to other Amazon facilities as well as the post office. So if you go down, now you're affecting all those sites that you're sending product to. So you're not just impacting yourself, you're impacting every other organization within the Amazon sites that you're sending to. So everyone had to be on board quickly to know what was going on and react. Well, okay, can we redirect it to this station that's not shut down? Can we redirect these trucks that are bound to go in there to these other stations for them to handle the capacity as you have minimal capacity over here?
And for the people,
those are the things you're able to do. But having that communication where it could be done instantly was I say was probably one of the most remarkable things at an organization of that size.
Interesting, very interesting. So for the people who might not be familiar with the concept of cross-docking, okay, so maybe describe that a little bit, how that can be used. Let's say if they might not have incorporated as part of the processes,
most of your big companies are cross-docking. So you basically have a distribution center, a fulfillment center, and then you have like final mile, middle mile, however you want to say that. So basically, my center that I was at would take stuff in from some of the larger fulfillment centers. Now, I was more of a distribution center that would take those products and now go to the post offices. So now like the U.S. Postal Service would pick up very early in the morning. And so you had all those ready by zip codes and zones. But then also cross-docking meant we were sending it to another. So say like in Boston, for instance, you might send it from Boston to an area in Worcester. Because now all those deliveries for Worcester can be taken into Worcester Center and then divided out locally rather than trying to do it all the way from Boston. So you were sending other stuff, creating smaller shipments and combining to other Amazon sites to make it, speed of efficiency. So that location was only handling product within that scope that they deliver to. They did not have to deal with stuff for Boston in a Worcester location. They were only doing it. And now from a larger company, you think about creating almost like micro fulfillment.
Okay.
So when you start looking at that, you start touching on what I would call would be micro fulfillment in the sense that you're creating smaller centers that operate more efficiency based on where they're delivering to. That, with Amazon, it was always customer focused. So it was one of those things that you did everything to keep that customer happy, regardless of how you did it. So now with micro fulfillment, like for me, currently we have five distribution, warehouses. Well, is everything shipping optimally out of there? What if we put one in between California and Texas? Now we can serve those customers in the middle much faster in one day than it's going to take 2 days from the other center. So it's what I've spurned into what you would look at for micro fulfillment center for these bigger companies, and depends on the company you're at, because sometimes you're feeding your own company and sometimes you're customer facing. So depending on what you're doing, you could be distributing material to other warehouses that are doing production. And your speed and efficiency allows them to build to a schedule or have flexibility to bump up production to increase sales. But your ability to get stuff to the door is what's very critical. And being able to adapt on the fly and make those changes as you need to. But more importantly is be able to have that communication above the chain of command, that you're able to communicate back saying, hey, if we made this small change, we could be so much more efficient.
Yeah.
And is that something in the ballpark we're looking at in year 1, 3, 5? Are we looking at that in the long game, or are we content where we're at now? But if we really want to move the needle, we might want to look at changing some things, here or there to be able to create more efficiency as customers want that Amazon effect. They want that 1-2 day shipping, and, to be able to buy something and say it's going to take a week, sometimes you can lose a customer. It's kind of the downside of being at Amazon is you're trying to create that at other places. And it's difficult because, like you said, you got the funding there is very different, with what you have for spend versus, a smaller company where you have to be very vigilant on that spend, not only by month, but by quarter. So you're reversing your spend for your quarter down to a monthly allotment. And if you go over that, you're going to have a problem. So if someone throws that curveball and, hey, can we get an extra 5,000 units? Yeah, we can, but it's going to be costly because now I got to air freight them in. Your total landed cost now goes up.
Yeah.
It messes with your procurement team because now your moving average for your cost goes up. And they're usually coming back saying, why? Why did the per piece thing go up $5 this month when it's on average? And it's like, well, it's because you air freighted 2,000 in and your air freight cost went up, and we usually put these on an ocean. So now you're changing the moving average. So now you deal with accounting problems, sales problems.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that it's very easy for things to go in off-ramp tangents very quickly, depending on what the ask is.
Okay, so this is very interesting. So now in the initial case, when you said that I can act based on these, so in that you have to make certain arrangements, and that is going to impact the cost as well. In this particular case as well, your cost is changing. So somebody is watching that.
Well, especially, if you're looking at manufacturing, that your stuff maybe is manufactured in China with a 25% tariff versus if you have the product in Thailand where it may be 7.5%, that difference in that tariff cost could be a 2-3% difference in your profitability.
Yeah.
So you have to be very focused on, okay, sales may come and say, hey, can we get an extra 5,000? They're not realizing that full circle, where it's coming from, how often it takes to get in, that build cycle your manufacturer has in order to do that.
Yeah.
So that ask is sometimes a very big ask, but they're not seeing it. But, as someone that has to put together the puzzle pieces, okay, now I get to air freight. My per unit cost is going to be up. My tariffs are high.
Yeah.
So we have to take a look at how does it affect the profit margin if I air freight. And that's what we have. We have calculators that will say, if you want air freight versus ocean, this is how it affects the numbers. And all the way up to the chain of command, they say yes or no. So if they want something urgent, that's great. But I need approvals if we're going to, change a number that's going to affect somebody, especially because you have sales guys that maybe are commission based.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, they want that in there, but they're not realizing that it's commission-based percent, more than likely off of net profit.
Yeah.
And if that net profit drops because you air freighted something in urgent, it really negates the fact of what you did. But if you're doing it to make the customer whole, different story.
Yeah. And so touch a little bit more on why was it easier at Amazon and not as easy at these smaller companies? Because the budget process is different. Or why was it easier?
Well, some of it at Amazon, like for me, the stuff was already here, so it was just at different buildings.
Okay.
What I deal with currently now is, say you have X amount of a percent manufactured overseas. I can't just go pull something off the shelf. I'm relying on a vendor overseas that manufactures this, that's got a 6 to 8 week lead time.
Right.
And now I'm asking them to do it in 4 weeks, which means my cost goes up. And so the bigger the company, you have all these cost factors that chip in and that increase that total landed cost at the end of the day, that your procurement software picks up, or your ERP. And at the bigger company, sometimes the profit's enough in that margin per part that it's not a problem. But when you're dealing with, say, like electronics, you're dealing with microchips, a jump in the microchip cost could make the difference of profitability very quickly. Yeah. But if you were looking at, say even Amazon or even a medical company, their profit margins are much larger per unit, where you have more room for maneuverability than you would as a smaller company or narrow margin.
Yeah, very interesting. So let's go back to your stories, I guess. I mean, those we want to discuss, especially, concerning China, I guess. I mean, so you are doing a lot of stuff there as well, trying to move the vendors, and that could be a massive project in itself, right? So tell us the whole background in terms of why it started, what was the overarching vision, what you had to accomplish, and then how it was accomplished.
I mean, so currently, like right now, if we were looking at, how much of a percentage of your product is made overseas, for me, China.
Yeah.
And we're looking at anywhere from 60 to 80% that's
Yeah.
made over there, especially when you're dealing with microchips, PCB boards.
Yeah.
It's very quick that your profit could be erased because of the 25% tariff. Now, there's other ways to try to offset the tariffs, which are like 301 exclusions and this and that. So there's a lot of other areas, but if you were able to secure manufacturing outside of China, so say for me right now, moving stuff to say Thailand or Vietnam, most of these manufacturing companies already have entities in those countries.
Yeah.
So I'm not switching to a whole new manufacturer. I'm just asking this particular manufacturer to change production into that country. Now, in doing so, yes, you have a cost increase. So say, for instance, the cost to manufacture something in Thailand versus China is 10, 15% more, or, in that range, but not having a 25% tariff, you're still saving a net of anywhere from 10 to 15% on that unit now as a total landed cost, not having it manufactured in China with those tariffs. So you may pay a little bit more to have it manufactured, but not having a very as high of a tariff coming out of China.
Yeah.
Your total landed cost now as an operation is low. And so your profitability increases because of that change. Now, it's not easy to do because now you have certificate of origins, you have quality stamps, all these things that are affected and impacted. So it's not an easy shift or an easy lift. But a lot of times now, a lot of companies are very open to it. And I think that's one of the things that I found, pretty remarkable is the openness of companies to be able to do that, those kind of asks. But when you look at it as a whole organization, the cost savings could be in the millions. So when you're talking in the millions, it's well worth exploring that option to see what does it look like. Because if you take, let's just say hypothetically, a company takes their top 100 items.
Yeah.
How many of those 100 items are manufactured in China? Now, if you were able to move 50% of those items or 25% of them out of China and not have that 25% tariff, how much increase to your bottom line does that make? Now, many companies, I would say you're probably anywhere from, 8 to 15% increase in profit by doing something like that. So it's well worth exploring. Not everyone can do it. And that's the whole other thing is it may not be viable to do that, but it's worth the exploration to say, hey, we've thought about it.
Yeah.
And I think these questions come up more as you have companies that are owned by private equity, owned by investor financing, because their dollars are tied up in your company. And if your company's growing, they may have a limited amount of money they can contribute to you as you've grown. So as in their pocket that they have to contribute to your company. You can increase that profitability for them, then it makes it more of an easier, solution as you start facing these.
Okay, so from the operations perspective, what is the real difference between a company that is going to be owned by private equity? Because obviously we are dealing with, different companies. Some are going to be mom and pop, private equity, public. They all operate very differently. So overall, from the cost structure perspective, what are they looking at when they are, structured?
When they're structured, they obviously want to maintain a certain amount of profitability. Naturally, so you invest in your 401k. You'd love to be able to control your losses or your profits there. So they obviously want a certain return on investment. So if you're year over year from one year to the next is asking for another 20 million, they may want to say, hey, we want you to return 10 million, 15 million in profitability off of that 20 million or more to justify that additional ask. With your mom and pop, I think the mom and pop stores or the smaller organically grown companies have a much larger chance of increasing profitability than larger companies that are private equity owned, because they don't have too many pieces of the pie going elsewhere. They're owned, family owned and operated. So their amount of that they have to pay out either to private equity percentages and so forth. Obviously they may have financing, but they're able to an increase in profitability of 5% to them would be, could be life changing, versus, a private equity where it's a couple points on a stock, or depending on how they're looking at it. So, those are those ones when you look at there. So it's the ability to have this be a win, regardless of the size of the company, is there, depending on what space they're in. As you look at those, whether the manufacturing is predominantly overseas or not.
Okay, and what was the CO1 exclusion, I guess you mentioned in between, and I don't know if listeners are going to be familiar with that. So do you want to talk a little bit about what that is and how that affects the tariffs?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, in tariffs, when you start talking tariffs and HTS codes,
we can probably have one more episode just on that, I guess.
Yeah. Yes. There's reclassification. So what happens is, as part of the China tariffs that are coming on board, they list a group of exclusions. So now, as the time went on, they said, okay, well, if you're a radio and you got this, crazy display, you're getting 25%. There's no redoing it. But if you're just looking at the wire connector that connects that radio, you don't really need to be at 25%. You can be at 12. You can be at 7.5. So they don't need to hit you with everything being 100%, 25% because it's manufactured in China. It's a way to get exclusion rulings based on the product description and product utilization that allows you to help offset those HTS, codes. The other way to do it is some companies use free trade zones or FTZs, depending on the they use, and depending on your Incoterms, you can offset those taxes by putting it in a free trade zone. And then you're only paying for that tax as you pull that product out that you have a sale to. So you could create an FTZ in your own warehouse, bring in items. They're stored in the FTZ, which is a secure location. There's a lot of rules, but it's doable. You basically have I call it a fenced-in area. No one has access to other than certain credited individuals. Your imports go in there.
Okay.
Now, say you brought in 1,000 pieces. You leave those 1,000 pieces in your FTZ. But now you get a sales order for 100. Okay, you pull up those 100. But now you're only paying a tax on those 100 as you pull them out. But you have a sales order tied to it. So you already have a profitability there.
Okay.
What the difference is, some of these companies now, especially during COVID, when ocean transit was 60 or 70 days, you have a bunch of money tied up in inventory. And you're not able to sell it because it's still in transit. Because most companies, you're getting billed the minute it ships. So now here's the stuff sitting on the water 60, 70 days. Your company's out $1 million to bring in this product. They're tariffs. And you can't even. And so it created a very big ripple in the sales environment because your lead time versus, the sales time that you were doing those things. So that's where like FTZs come into play that I think are really beneficial for companies. Is it helps you offset your company's cash outlay to be able to generate that sale. And the more you can do, and especially as you look at like private equity companies, a lot of them use what I call negative cash flow conversion.
Okay.
And it's there. Once you, having an understanding of how the companies operate and how the company may own you operates, it's basically they want to hold on to their cash as much as possible. So they want you to maybe have a 60 or 90-day term with your vendor. They want to sell it 30 days, get that money, and then pay the vendor. So they're not using the cash that's sitting in the bank. So say, for instance, you ordered a part. That part, they're going to charge you, $100. You have that order. They have that order. Now they're not paying the vendor or the manufacturer they bought it from for 60 days. So now they're able to generate income and use the income from the profitability to pay that vendor, not the cash value, not the cash sum that's sitting in the bank. So that cash reserve can get held to the side for longer to do other things as you need it. And I think that's, utilizing your FTZs, those things, those are what help the company, maintain cash flow. Because sometimes companies will borrow based on inventory or they'll borrow based on percentage, based on what they have in cash in the bank.
And who's auditing these free trade zone? What if I call my warehouse as free trade zone and related tariffs?
You can set them up. So you can create one. It probably would take you a couple months working with the freight forwarder, but then you have certain accredited individuals in your organization. They're the people. They're the person that is the only one allowed in or in, because it's it's essentially it's kind of, I call it a no man's land. It's essentially still a U.S. territory, if you will, but they're not able to tax that yet until you move that product out of that trade zone. So you're able to, anyone that has a bigger freight forwarder, they have FTZs. If you have a large enough footprint in the U.S., you can make your own FTZ within each of your warehouses. So depending on that, but I think a lot of times, depending on the price point of the product, it's really not worth it for some companies. But if you have a larger price point or bigger projects that you want to do and you want to protect that cash that you have in reserve, then it's something worthwhile.
Yeah, very interesting. So let's go back to those vendors, right? So from your perspective, when you were sort of telling them, you know what, I don't want this from China, I'll go to Vietnam and I'll get it from there, right? So from your perspective, it's easy, but they are doing business in China for a reason. I don't know if it is going to be cheaper there, and if it is going to be simply flipping the switch. I mean, why would they supply from China to begin with? But then they are ready for the other locations as well. So I'm not sure from their perspective, are they trying to move these businesses out of China right now? Are these Chinese companies or what's going on?
A lot of times, the vendors I deal with, they already have a footprint there. So we're not asking them to, like I always say, we're not asking them to recreate the wheel. We're just asking them to change the allocation because they may do a certain level of production in Hong Kong, Thailand, Vietnam. And then the final assembly is just put together in China. Well, what if we change that up? What if we do the final assembly here? Still do your PCB boards and all of that in China that they're doing, but your total assembly, your final assembly, is now done at their plant in another part of the country. That the ask of them is not as big because they already have that footprint. But now that allows me to say that product, as you had it built, is no longer fully produced and manufactured in China. It's produced in Hong Kong, Thailand, Vietnam, with obviously some components that are still going to come from China. But based on that percent composition, you can say whether or not you are going to have an increase or decrease in tariff. Now, your costs may be higher because their labor costs are going to be different in parts of the country. That's why your per unit cost may go up. But now, if you are able to not have that 25% tariff because nothing's coming and manufactured more in China, you're able to save that net goal between that product increase and the cost of that tariff.
Yeah, very interesting. So I think we can go on for hours. This is a very interesting conversation, but we only had like 35, 40 minutes. So
it's fine. We went off on a tangent when we first were talking, and but that's I think that's the joy of it is being as I said, there's no secret sauce. So it's being able to have conversations with people, people to have dialogue, people to have questions. Just reach out, jump on a 30-minute call. What else do you have to lose? You can't take 30 minutes out of your day to jump on there to help somebody out. And I think that's what really helps perpetuate, the supply chain and the logistics industry is that people are willing to do these things. They're willing to have talks. They're willing to have that dialogue and share some of that information. Because like as I said before, there's no secret sauce. There's no trade secrets here. I mean, you're moving product A to B. You're doing it maybe differently than some other companies. So you're not talking about anything that's protected intellectual property, obviously some of these bigger companies, they have their own widgets, if you want to call them, that help with the efficiencies, but I think that's what you create is what you need and what you have for your vision. And that's what we rely on, that strategic vision to say, what is our goal? What is our 1, 3, 5-year plan? And how do we enact that every day in order to get to that point? And yes, you have those players that are operating individually, but you need that gatekeeper that can connect all three and be able to speak the language at all three levels to be able to have that, that work collaborated. And then you're able to teach that because someone on the ground floor doesn't know that, hey, if I don't do this, what does it affect the company? Like they're not under, as long as you have that unified vision that they know what that goal is, it's very easy for everyone to work together. Under a common, goal to achieve the task.
Yeah, could not agree more. And my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be have that gatekeeper and have that common goal and communicate. On that note, John, really want to appreciate your time. This has been a powerful episode.
Oh, yes. Thank you for having me. Like I said, I love the opportunity, and, anyone feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm usually always available. And like I said, you sent me the message. We're on a call a day or two later. That's, this is what it's all about, is sharing that knowledge and helping others out, and help perpetuating, that the common goal that we face in supply chain and logistics.
Love your energy. Love that you are being super approachable. Thank you again for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you would like to learn more about John, connect and follow him on LinkedIn. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.